Welcome to Small Business Stories. I am Mike Downhour from the Monroe Chamber, Quentin Durr from Origin Bank and Louisiana Catalyst. With us right now, Mr. Ethan Hunt, NELA Title. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
First of all, tell us a little bit about this Ethan Hunt guy.
I was born and raised in the area. Grew up here in Monroe. Graduated from Neville High School back in the 90s. Went off to school for a little while to Louisiana Tech, and I was originally going to go to medical school, couldn't figure out quite how that was going to work, and sort of changed my direction, and at the last minute ended up in law school. So, but while I was in law school, I got married to my wife, Erin, who ironically was from here. We had our first child my third year of law school, so I remember at one point studying for the bar exam. And they had these little bouncy seats, which I assume they still have for kids. And I was rocking my baby, who is now a senior in high school, with my feet while I'm studying for the bar exam. Everybody else was at the law school library, just underwater working on it. But I had already transitioned at least a little bit into being a father. So now I've got 3 kids, and my wife works here in town as a speech therapist with a local nursing home. And but yeah, that's pretty much me.
Well, that studying with a child seemed to work out for you there.
It did, and it was probably good that I had that, that forced maturity, I think, maybe. So I didn't stay in college mode. It matures you a little bit once you have a life depending on you.
Well, right now you have NELA Title. Talk to us about that. What does it do? What are you a part of? And talk about your small business success.
Okay. So my partner and I have a partner, Rob Garner. He and I actually, we date back to probably kindergarten or elementary school. We've known each other, actually went to law school together, went on separate paths after that. He went with a small firm here in town, and I ended up with a different firm. And one thing led to another. After about 15 years of practice, we were having lunch, just in general, just discussing business. And we were comparing notes, and his firm, everybody was significantly older than him and was slowly retiring. And I had recently gone out on my own, sort of taking the plunge without really looking to see what was below me. And we were comparing notes, and we decided it might be a good time to throw in together and work together. We knew we could trust each other, so we figured, let's see what this will turn into. And that was right before COVID hit.
Oh boy, that will change things.
Well, yeah, we signed the deed to purchase our office space. I think it was March of 2020.
Oh my!
And like March 15th, they closed the world down.
They shut it down. Yeah.
And so I just remember thinking, I remember calling Rob and saying, "How big's your line of credit?"
How much capital do you got?
Yeah, I was like, how far can we make this? Because, at that point, now looking back, everything that happened, but at that point, it was unpredictable. We didn't know
it was only going to be for 2 weeks at first, remember?
Well, we didn't know if it was the Black Plague, what in the world we were dealing with. And then, of course, it was hammering the economy. But ironically, what happened was with all the stimulus efforts, the refinances of houses went bonkers. And we cut our rates on refis to get business, and the next thing we knew, we had more than we could handle.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and ironically, that industry really thrived for a couple of years. The real estate market just boomed, and so we fell backwards. Timing-wise, fell backwards into just a golden opportunity, and it really gave us a chance to chisel out a market share. And so we were very fortunate there. But yeah, NELA Title, and I didn't really tell you what it does. NELA Title, we specialize in residential or commercial loan closings. So when somebody looks to purchase a piece of property, either they'll talk to their real estate agent or their banker, and at one point, once they agree on the price and the property, they need an attorney to review the title to make sure that there are no ticking time bombs. There's no landmines there. There's, so to speak, make sure that who's selling it actually owns it.
Right. Yeah.
Basically. And so that's our role, is we do the boring work of reviewing the history of who sold it to who as far back as we can get within reason. And if there are problems, we either fix them or we offer title insurance to cover those potential flaws. It's really dull and boring, but it appeals to me. I enjoy problem solving, and I enjoy sitting at my desk with a problem and just sort of methodically working through it. It's kind of like untangling a knot. You sort of take one piece and start working. And it's satisfying because typically you do find an end result where you've solved the problem. And in the legal world, that's not always the case. Sometimes things just aren't solvable. But in this situation, usually there is a solution, and you just have to research it and look through it.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much, like, the importance of that title search.
Yeah.
That even if you have a legal description, that somebody could have made a mistake years ago and just changed one number, and it completely throw off what you're buying. And so not getting that checked is always, I mean, touch on that, like, if your advice of why you should get a title search when you're buying property.
I've had to explain this to some people. One of the things that I always tell people is title insurance is based on the sale price. It's a fraction of it's a percentage of the sales price. I think it's 1 or 2%. But it's, as opposed to car insurance, it's an insurance that you pay a premium on once, and then it persists the lifetime that you own the property. And what I tell people is, don't get cheap on that. This is probably one of your biggest purchases in your lifetime. The average person, their home purchase is going to be one of their largest single purchases. You don't want to get cheap on that. When you lay your head down at night, you're comfortable knowing, one, you want to make sure if Joe Blow offers you to sell you a house, how do you know he owns it?
Right.
Unless you have somebody like me review it, you're taking his word. Two, how do you know he didn't have a partner in it? Or how do you know that mama didn't die and leave it to him, but also leave it to 9 other people?
Right.
So there's things like that you have to check. But beyond that, there's things you have to check as far as, what if he didn't pay his taxes a few years ago and the government put a lien on it?
Right.
So there's all kinds of little technicalities. And the vast majority of the time, honestly, those things aren't a problem. But it's when it is a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
Well, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
My wife and I tried to buy some land. It was not a big plot of land, just a few acres. And we got into the process, and I'm relating to what you're saying here. It had 20 heirs. And not everyone really wanted to sell, or they didn't agree on the price that we agreed on. Long story short, we bought another piece of property.
Right.
We could not work with a situation like that. And had it not been for somebody like you, we would have never even have discovered that.
And look, I've had personal friends call me and say, well, does it look clean? And I'll tell them, yes, it looks clean, but the insurance is not for what I see. It's for what I don't see.
Yeah.
I still remember back in the Iraq War, I think it was at Ashcroft. It was one of the administration's people. And I remember he made a comment that I thought was ridiculous at the time, but as I've gotten older, I realized I just didn't understand it. He always said, there are things we know, there are things we know we don't know, and then there are the unknown unknowns.
We don't know that we don't know it.
Yes, we don't even know enough to know we don't know it. And that's what keeps me up at night as a title attorney. And that's what I'm insuring. I'm not insuring, yes, if I find a problem, I'm going to tell you about it and I'm going to fix it. But it's the things I don't see that keep me up at night. And I tell, my dad bought a house a few years ago, and he got title insurance. I reviewed it. It had 2 owners in 60 years. And I told him, it's probably fine. You're buying title insurance. So while I do make a profit off of it, I truly believe that if you're buying a piece of property, you should get title insurance.
Okay, well, explain what that is.
Well, title insurance, in large part, while I'm an attorney, I'm also an insurance agent, like anybody selling car insurance would be. So I sell for a company called First American. A lot of people like me have multiple companies they can sell for. No big deal. So if you had a problem where after you bought a piece of property and I sold you a title policy, after closing, let's say a year later, out of the blue, out of left field, somebody shows up and says either I own 10% of that house because grandmama left it to me, or maybe a bank shows up and says nobody told you, but there was a mortgage on that house for $60,000 and I'm foreclosing.
Wow.
Okay. And I've seen these scenarios. What happens then is you pull out that insurance policy. And that's what I always tell my clients. I'm going to put this in an envelope. You're going to put it somewhere and forget about it. Don't discard it. Put it somewhere. Let it gather dust. Hopefully you'll never need it. But if you do need it, you pull it out. You open it up. You find the number to call. And you trigger it. And it's just like if you got in a car wreck and you call and say, I've got a problem. And they will send you an attorney to defend you, to stand in between you and the bad people and protect your interests. And if it's a legitimate mortgage, they might have to pay that off. But instead of you having to pay that off.
Right.
And so they'll protect you, and ideally, obviously I've done my search. Hopefully it's not something I just missed out of carelessness. Hopefully it's something I couldn't have found.
We're all human.
I mean, it does happen. And I tell people that all the time too. I check over it, look at it, see what you see. But yes, insurance. The insurance I sell is to protect the home, and that's the people I represent in these transactions are the buyers. I don't represent the seller. I don't represent the bank, and I don't represent the real estate agents. I represent the buyer. And so when the buyer has issues, that's where I engage and start working. But yes, And typically, it is typically optional to purchase the title insurance, and I will tell everybody you should buy it. If they don't, that's fine, but I'm going to also put in writing, I've advised you to buy this, and if you choose not to, that's fine.
All right, if we choose to not go through somebody like NELA Title or you or have the insurance, what's the alternative? And I'm sure you've got a story or two about those.
Well, and those make me cringe. I've seen plenty of things that are essentially written on a cocktail napkin where, say, neighbors decide we don't need an attorney, let's just do this. And I get it because I understand that attorneys make things more complicated. A lot of my colleagues do that. Sometimes I do that. And I try not to overcomplicate things. But the reality is, sometimes we make things more complicated because we know how many pitfalls there can be. But I've seen plenty of times where people have a handwritten single-page document that's supposed to transfer ownership of a certain piece of property. And it turns out either it doesn't describe it good enough. So let's say Quentin sells to Mike a piece of property on a handwritten document. Well, 10 years later, Mike is moving out of town and wants to sell that piece of property. And your buyer comes to me and says, well, this is how Mike got it, and hands me that handwritten document. I could tell him, I'm sorry, this is not even valid. Quentin still owns it, and we don't know
job,
where
Quentin.
Yeah, and we don't know where Quentin is now. Quentin,
Mike, I got some problems.
As long as it's not a bridge, we're okay.
And I've had plenty of people, suggest something like that, and I typically tell them, look, I will do my best to keep the price as low as possible. If you want no title insurance, fine. At least let me prepare the paperwork.
Right.
Because you are begging for a problem.
Get a clean deed,
Well, and look, and I can be blunt, and I've told people that I'm close enough friends with, if you can't afford a couple of $100 for a deed, you can't afford the property.
Yeah.
You need to walk. You're forcing this in a place it's not supposed to be. And sometimes that's just the truth.
Well, as a dad, as a small business owner, you're obviously vested into this area. That means you're on board of directors. And I've been on multiple in the past. I'm sure Quentin is on some now as well. But one in particular one is you are on the board of Habitat for Humanity. I know personally that you've had to rebuild that board. But we got to be a part of a really amazing key ceremony where the Habitat Board was able to hand the keys off to a new homeowner. And man, just take us through that process. And I realize it's all volunteer, unpaid.
Oh, yeah.
But it's what makes this community what it is, are volunteers.
Well, and, I developed a passion for Habitat years ago. When I was in law school, I was part of a church down in Baton Rouge and got to work on a few builds. And growing up with my dad and the church we were in, we spent a lot of time doing handyman stuff at our own house, but also in my dad's Sunday school class. If somebody was building a hunting camp or whatever, it was no big deal for my dad to go spend a few days working. And I was like, his dog, you open up the truck, I jump in and I'm going with him. And so I was just everywhere with him. So I grew up with a hammer in my hand doing that kind of work and enjoyed every minute of it. So Habitat was a good combination to me of a good Christian outreach service, but also it was in the sweet spot of the kind of work I enjoy doing. And so when I came back up here, I worked for a few years as an attorney, and I just wanted something a little more to where I could give back something. And so I reached out to Larry Head, who at the time was executive director of Habitat, and he invited me pretty quickly to be part of the board. I was talking about what I could do to help, and he said, "We're just going to be part of the board. That would be
We got a spot for you."
And so, I didn't realize at the time. At the time, I thought, boy, I've really been lucked into this.
It would luck. That's okay.
But so I spent Habitat. You're only supposed to, I believe it's 8 years is your max term. I did 10 years because we had a little bit of a problem at the very end of my tenure. But we spent a lot of time. I mean, we built so many houses. What I get passionate about is people don't understand the Christian point of Habitat. The fact that it's not a handout. I always say it's not a handout, it's a hand up. Mm-hmm. They do an extensive vetting process of reviewing these potential homeowners. It's homeowners that are working themselves. They're really doing everything they can do, and they're right on the verge of making that turn. And they just need one person to reach a hand out and say, "I've been blessed, I'll help you." And so these people put in 250 sweat equity hours, meaning they go and swing a hammer, push a broom, paint, whatever. And then they're not given anything. They are sold a house that has a mortgage on it. That mortgage is 0% interest, because, and a lot of people miss this, there's
no interest.
There's a part of the Bible that says you're not supposed to charge people interest. A lot of bankers I know don't like that part, but it's a biblical thing to give without looking for something in return. And so they make monthly payments, and it'll be a 20-year mortgage, and they make these monthly payments, and those monthly payments go to Habitat and enable it to build the next house.
Okay.
And
it's a reinvestment type thing.
Well, at one point while I was on the board, I remember looking, and we had like 44 active mortgages. And of those 44, I think we had 3 or 4 in delinquency. And of those 3 or 4 that were in delinquency, only I think one of them didn't have a legitimate excuse, like a death in the family or loss of a job. Only one of them was a true, maybe we made a mistake giving this person the thing. But it was just amazing to me, the success rate. And you take these people. I remember working on one of my first houses up here, and it's over there off of Washington Street, and I still see it when I pass by it. I remember being on the roof, putting trusses up. And I had been there from putting the concrete down up to that, and there was a neighbor who had knee-high grass in his yard when we first started. And we're on the roof, and I'm looking over there, and here he comes. First time I'd seen him come out, and he starts picking stuff up in his yard and mowing his yard and cleaning up his yard. It's like a reverse virus.
Right.
It's like you go to these areas that are a little bit depressed, and you put a nice quality built house in.
Positive peer pressure.
Right. And it sort of infects the surroundings where they start thinking, well, they've got a nice house, maybe I should. And it just cascades. And that's a great thing. And I think it's wonderful for our area. I mean, I think Kathy Gardner at the last meeting, at that key ceremony, said they had 61 houses now that I think they had built, which is incredible to think about how many houses.
The 61 families that are truly, they've been made a difference in.
Well, and some of these people can fall prey to unscrupulous landlords where they'll have multiple families in one small house that may not be, but then suddenly they get to a house where kids can have their own bedrooms, where they can have energy efficient houses that don't leak and they can, and then, like I say, at the end, they have something, they own something, So, it's really, I think there's no downside to Habitat. I've always been very passionate about that. And like I say, I spent about 10 years on that one. I retired from it a couple of years ago. I'm sure at some point I will circle back to it when they call me. And Kathy Gardner, she's my next door neighbor, so she's not going to let you get away. No, she's a bit of a bulldog. She'll never let me all the way go, and that's fine. I love Kathy, so anything she needs, I'll do for her.
All right. Other things about NELA Title that help make you realize the impact you're having in this area. We know you're protecting. We know you're helping out clients. But is there any other advice that you would say to a potential client why they should call you, why they should consider your advice?
Well, doing the title work that we do. I guess the longer I'm in the business, and I've said this before, and this may not be the best way to say it, I always tell people, look, I'm not trying to make a living off of just you, okay? I have a longer viewpoint here. And so I tell people, I might have to tell you that this is something that you need to walk away from, and I'm willing to do that.
Well, you're protecting us.
Right. I mean, and I take that seriously. And I'll be pretty blunt with an individual of, I can't advise you to do this deal under these circumstances. If you can't get certain things changed or achieve certain things, then this is not a deal that I can endorse, that I think you can do. And I'm not talking about prices. I'm not an expert on real estate prices or anything like that. I'm talking about if there are flaws in the thing, I'm going to object. I'm going to point out. I don't want it to ever come back that they got into a bad deal and I didn't point it out. So there's that. I get a lot of calls from small business people, and it's kind of a natural thing. Maybe it's an investment group that wants to start buying rental properties, or maybe it's something completely unrelated. I have several clients who have small businesses where they introduce themselves to me by acquiring a piece of property to put their business in. Right. And then we start discussing, well, have you got an LLC? All these other things. And eventually it just organically grows into where pretty much anytime they have something going on, they call me. And that's what historically I usually tell my clients, look, call me before it's a problem.
Yeah.
You can call me when it's a problem, but I'm just saying sometimes you can call me and I can help it not become a problem.
Yeah, get the advice up front.
Yeah, if you're thinking about entering a deal, and I'm not going to nickel and dime you and charge you every time you ring my bell, I would much rather you call me than not call me because you're scared it's going to cost you $1. Just call me and let's make sure, because my goal is to work for the next 20 or 30 years and have clients that I work with for the next 20 or 30 years that are successful and that we work well together and that they're comfortable calling me and saying, this just happened, what do you think?
Right.
I want them to never have a problem calling.
That's just being a good advisor.
I think so. I mean, to a degree, as attorneys, we're counselors at law. That's a term. And I find, I've never really done divorce work because that's not really my cup of tea, but I do enjoy counseling people in small business, counseling people even in larger businesses. I enjoy, like I said earlier, I enjoy being a problem solver. And so I enjoy just tell me what's going on. And sometimes I've had it happen many times where what I do is connect them with somebody else.
Right.
And I end up making nothing off of it. But it's just, who you need to talk to is this guy over here that I happen to know. And I put them in touch, and then I walk away. And so, like I say, I make nothing off of it. But I see value in having a client who trusts me, a client who's viable for the long term, a client who's good for the community. I mean, my kids go to school here. I live in this community. I need it to be viable as well.
Right.
Everybody needs an Ethan in their life.
Right.
Ethan, talk to us about how to get in touch with you. Anybody that's watching right now, that how do we get to you? Website, things like that.
We have a website, NELATitle.com, and there are contact options there. You can always call our office at 388-4304 and get my receptionist and get to us. Of course, email is always easy. It's just Ethan@NELATitle.com. My partner is Rob at NELATitle.com. Nothing fancy or creative there. We have social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. I've had people reach out to us that way. And for most of my title clients, I'm perfectly happy to give out my cell phone number. Mm-hmm. I've told many of them, look, if 6 o'clock rolls around and you've got a question in your mind, text me.
Is it A or P?
Oh, either. Well, here's the thing. And I've told people, I said, my phone goes on silent mode at about 9 o'clock at night and turns back on at 5.
There's the magic number.
Hey,
okay.
You can text me. Right. I'm just not going to see it.
Okay, gotcha.
Get that response a little later.
Yeah. But yeah, I know how it is because sometimes I get a thought in my mind, and if I don't text you right now, I'm not going to remember it the next day.
Right.
I tell people all the time, just shoot me a text. We'll answer it right now.
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly happy to do that. I like to be accessible, especially, like I say, to real estate and business clients. Those folks, and my family's completely used to that. They understand. Sometimes I get up from the dinner table and go take a call or do a text or something. That's just the way it goes.
All right. Well, appreciate you being a part of this
Absolutely.
podcast.
Well, thank you very much for calling.
Ethan Hunt, NELATitle.com.
That's right.
All right. Thank you for telling us your small business story, your success, and appreciate you being a part of it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.